Right, hello everyone. We are now live on Facebook. Thank you very much for joining us. My name's Sarah, Head of Education for the Breck Foundation. We're doing this live today with Philip Wride, who is joining us from somewhere much warmer than my office, lucky him. Philip is an esports expert turned entrepreneur and educationalist. He's got some really fascinating things to tell us about the work that he's been doing, using gaming as an inspiration to help young people get to grips with maths in the classroom, but also beyond maths, other things as well. Now, one of the reasons that's really interesting for us as a charity is that our work takes us into schools regularly, and we have discovered ourselves that using gaming as a way to engage young people to talk about their online experiences is a really powerful tool. So one of the statistics that we talk about a lot at the Breck Foundation is that young people's first experience of connecting with someone or talking to someone online that they don't know is nearly always through gaming, because that's the way that they start to experience the online world. So our sort of key passions about gaming are that it can be a really powerful tool and a really useful tool for good. Quite often there are some quite negative ideas around gaming sometimes that we encounter with the parents that we talk to, and we like to keep a positive spin on it. We're pro-gaming charity, despite obviously Breck's tragic story. So Philip, thank you so much for joining us here today. I know we've had a brief chat before, and we have lots of things to say. We could fill a lot more than half an hour. But I wondered if we could start off just by, if you could tell us a little bit about, well, for everyone watching who doesn't know, what is an esports expert and how do you get to be that?
Thank you, Sarah. Great to be here. Yeah, what is an expert? How long do you have had to have done something to be classed as an expert? What do you have to know? A lot of people have seen esports in the news over the past couple of years. It's certainly grown. For me, I've been involved in esports for 22 years. So, that's where, if that expert label, I've seen things, I've done things, I've seen the changes in the industry. A lot of the work that I've done over the past couple of years has been consulting into brands and governments around the world. So, I guess that experience sometimes enables that expert label to be added to someone.
Absolutely.
Are there still things that I don't know and things that I could learn? Absolutely, because the industry is constantly changing. But yes, it's I guess it's a situation of, I've been doing this a long time in various different capacities. I started as a player. I played with friends at school. So I started playing online at 16. Mm-hmm. Played in a team with friends from school, then went on to manage teams, manage the world's best teams, set up a company straight out of university, and have sort of then gone on and done other things from that. So yeah, I've been involved in the industry in various different ways over those years. Okay,
brilliant, thank you. I mean, for me, it was interesting even to learn that the depth of what goes on in the esports industry, and that there are world-beating teams, and there are even that these teams need managing. That was all news to me. So it's a fascinating sort of sideline of the sort of the gaming world. For most of our parents, they see their children playing games online. So the Minecrafts of the world, and the FIFAs, and Fortnite. All those things that our young people are passionate about. But you were able to take that and turn it into a career. So tell me a little bit about how you moved from that kind of world and that industry world into the things you've developed now, into the discovering that gaming was such a useful educational tool.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, because actually there's a couple of parts to it. If I go back into the mists of time, so when I was at university, there was a gaming cafe in Sheffield, which is where I grew up and went to university. And I would go to that gaming cafe with some friends, my housemates, we would practice. And actually one day we went in between lectures, so this was sort of middle of the day, and in there were a group of young boys, probably 11, 12 years old. And they were playing a video game, practicing developing all of their soft skills. And I could see that, the communication between them as they were playing the game and, working through the objectives in the game and things like that. But the interesting thing for me, speaking to the owner of the cafe who had organized it, was that these were boys who had been disruptive in the classroom and almost removed from that environment. And now they were sat down and playing quite happily, and they were being engaged and they weren't being disruptive. And it's like, okay, so gaming can be used as a mechanism, as a hook to engage young people. So that was, years ago. Yeah. More recently, and actually what has, I guess, acted as that catalyst for the changes that I've made in my business and where my focus is. My partner is a teacher, a primary school teacher. She needed a maths lesson. So we had, conversations about, what could we do? What are the students going to be interested in? So this was for 9-year-olds. And through the conversations that I'd had with her about her students in the class and what they'd done previously, I knew that they all loved the game Among Us. Mm-hmm. Now, Among Us, if you're not familiar with the game, you become a crewmate. You go into a world, you have to do tasks in different rooms and different environments. One of you is an imposter and is trying to take out the rest of the crewmates. So it's we looked at that.
Wink Murder in Space, isn't it?
It is, yes. Yeah. And, I guess Cluedo, if you think a board game, you have to go and work out who is the imposter. But each of these levels then has rooms where the players all go and do their tasks. Now, the maths lesson was for perimeter. So we looked at that and went, okay, is there a way that we can use the game link as a hook for the lesson, get them to redesign all the rooms in one of the levels? So we spent some time putting that together, and I got a message the next day that said they're hooked. They love it because Brilliant. They recognize the link, the game context. It was something that was familiar to them. So they were actually like, yeah, you're asking me to redesign all the rooms in this game? Love it. Yes, of course. So that then started me down the path of saying, well, okay, if that's worked for this game and this type of lesson, what else could I do? So I started creating some maths resources for a couple of other games. So creating practice worksheets for Minecraft and Roblox, taking the game context. So in Minecraft, sometimes it's about survival, depending on the mode. Sometimes it's about being creative and building things and using different blocks. So there's maths questions that you can create around that of, if I've got X number of grass blocks and I need to get to, Y number, okay, what's the difference there? Is there a sum that I can create? So I started on started that process of, okay, let's try and create some more resources. Let's test them. The feedback that I got from parents was great because, the kids were like, it's based on the game. I recognize this. And they actually wanted to sit down and do some of the practice work, which was great. So, I've taken that and built out a full library now. Different games, different maths topics, different age groups. So I'm focusing on the 6 to 11-year-olds. So it's primary, effectively, trying to support them because it's also foundational maths, which is easier to link back to the game experiences. And on the back of that, I then sat and thought, okay, how can I actually help other people understand how to create their own resources? And from that, it's like, okay, I need to make it easy. I need to have a structure or something that other people can pick up. So I created a framework, which is called the Parrot framework. Okay. I also wanted to try and create a name that was easy to remember and potentially, plays into creating characters and things like that. So each letter in the Parrot framework is related to different pieces of functionality or mechanics that you may find inside a game. So even a game like Candy Crush, which a lot of people also play in their spare time when they're on the tube and, and various other things. A lot of the parts of the Parrot framework are also in that type of game. So P, as an example, is a progression system. You may get experience points. You may move up in levels. Now, in some games, that will be you improve your ability as a character or a player. Other games, it may be like Candy Crush and you're progressing on the map and on the journey and you can see the path in front of you and you're just progressing levels. So some of these things are presented slightly differently across different games, but the core principle is the same. And that's what you can then draw out and say, I can create a maths question around this and use that context. So created that framework, have the maths library, and that then led me to a couple of other interesting things.
Brilliant. And how are you sort of expanding that into schools? Like I mean, I know there'll be lots of teachers watching this who are sort of like eagerly champing at the bit going, how can I find these resources? What can I do? So have you sort of tried this out in more schools than just your partners? Like how has that been going down? How has that sort of played out?
I'm starting that process at the minute. For the school side, I've actually taken a slightly different approach. And again, that's largely based on what's happened in the conversations that I've had with teachers. So last year, I was fortunate enough to win a project, a government project here in Dubai, and it was to run a Minecraft tournament for school students. Okay?
Brilliant.
So that was for 8 to 11-year-olds. So for the UK system, that's years 4 to 6. So still primary focused.
Yeah.
The world that we used was a treasure hunt. So students had to work in teams of 4, go into a world, find treasure on a pirate island, take it back to their ship, avoid being killed by skeletons, avoid starving to death, avoid being eaten by sharks. And they also had a time limit. So there's lots of soft skills there that they were working on. Again, the teamwork, the problem solving, communication, all that sort of stuff. But as part of that experience, I actually went into schools and hosted their matches.
Okay.
Had those conversations with teachers, had those conversations with the students, and a lot of the teachers like, this is great. The students love it. I can see how they're engaging. It's a competitive format. They're not just building here. They're actually playing what maybe classed as traditional esports. How can we do more of this? How can we get additional resources? So I then started to think about that particular world in a slightly different way. And it's like, okay, so each of the dig spots has coordinates. Each of the dig spots where you find treasure, there's a different amount of treasure in each chest. Okay, so are there things then that I can use within that game world, again, as the context to create maths activities? So what I've done is I've created an 8-session pack, which takes somebody from, I'm just new to this world inside Minecraft, I need to understand it, all the way through to playing it in a 15-minute timed match, trying to dig up treasure and all the pressures of avoiding the skeletons and the sharks, but going through and doing some activities like, okay, let's think about route planning for the different coordinates for the dig spots. Let's think about creating bar charts and tally graphs and all those sorts of things for the amount of gold in each of the chests that we may be able to find. So I tried to build in specific activities that link back to the maths curriculum so that a teacher can come and say, okay, there's a pack here. There's a loose lesson plan, structure and outline with some learning objects and things like that. There's some supporting resources. There may be a tutorial video. There may be, a list of coordinates of where all the dig spots are so that teachers have a cheat sheet. So that's the type of thing that I'm now trying to create for teachers to use. Because again, they're in that environment with, potentially a group of students. They may be able to split them up into groups and do slightly different activities than you may be able to do if you were just a parent at home working one-on-one with a child.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you say, I was just thinking about when you were talking about your roots, when you were back in that cafe and you watched the kids who had been disruptive in their normal school, have you got any sense that what you're creating engages the children who are often harder to reach?
Yes. And I think there's 2 reasons for that. One is gaming is accessible to everybody.
Yeah, and we know that so many of our children, it's a huge amount.
It's a huge thing.
Yeah,
but
those people, top interest of boys aged 8 to 15. Yeah, it tops the list every time. So yeah.
Great stats. But I think the other thing is that for those people, we class as hard to reach or hard to connect with, aside from the questions of why is that, okay, if we think about it from what's their experience, where do they feel comfortable? Chances are they feel comfortable playing games, and that's what they'll spend some of their time doing.
Yeah.
If we can understand that, it gives us that opportunity to use the games to bring them to the fore, give them the opportunity to share their experience, share their knowledge, share their skills, feel part of that community and environment.
Brilliant. I think that's really good because one of our focuses at the moment, we launched our strategy in September, and one of our focuses is very much on harder to reach children. We're looking at deprived areas, but we're also looking at children who, for whatever reason, are traditionally not as easily engaged. And that's a really big challenge. So it's fantastic to hear of work that is actually going to be able to sort of plug that gap. Tell me a little bit about beyond maths. Can this go beyond maths? What else can we learn through Minecraft and Fortnite and even Candy Crush? Did you say you were creating new resources? You've got a book out, haven't you, about your sort of gaming sort of experiences, but are you creating more resources that are for beyond maths? We can learn about other things.
That is the long-term plan. So yes, I've just launched a book. It's called Watch Us Play. It's available on Amazon. That's the cover if you look for it.
Oh, look at that. Handily, you have a copy right there.
Of course. So this first one is about maths, because that's, been the start of the journey. And actually the book is split into two halves. The second half is about the maths side, creating their own resources, the Parrot framework, things like that. The first half of the book is actually about tips, tools, techniques for managing device time without the arguments, why kids love to play video games, trying to dispel some of the myths around video games, like they all cause violence. So that, the first part of the book is about trying to equip and support parents and teachers with building that relationship with children and students around video games, understanding the games, again, managing that device time in an effective way. And the second half, yes, is the math stuff. But what that means is then you've asked the question about other subjects within the education system, the curriculum. That's going to be book number 2.
Yeah.
So I've already started thinking about, okay, if this works for maths and I've been able to create a framework, how can we think about other subjects? Okay, English is a great and almost say an easy one. The challenge is changing mindset. Okay. And when I talk to parents and I talk to teachers, one of the questions I always ask is, what do students prefer to write about their favorite video game character or someone who's been dead for 300 years?
Good question.
Generally, the answer will be, I'd much prefer to write about my favorite video game character.
Yeah.
And it's about finding the flexibility within the curriculum to say, where can I plug in things that actually are of interest to the students. A lot of the curriculum is, it's like, okay, we need to do this English book and this book and this book and this book, and you sit there and go, who cares? That's harsh, and the teachers do a fantastic job. I support them. I recognize and appreciate all the work that they do. A lot of my friends are teachers. The system as a whole, though, that's a different story. So it's about how can we potentially leverage that experience that video games give children and try and then link it and pull it through into aspects of the curriculum. So yes, the second book I'm starting to think about will be, okay, how can we do it for maths? How can we do it for science? How can we do it for geography and history and various other things? Now, if you think about science, Minecraft as a game is great because there are already lessons in there for different science topics and various other things. So some of the popular games, have learning activities, lesson plans, all that sort of stuff that teachers can use already. For me, it will be about, again, how do we take, the popular games and those experiences and try and link them back to the curriculum to say, right, use the game as a hook. You can still meet your objectives. You're just doing it in a slightly different way.
Brilliant. I think it's really exciting what you're doing. It's really good. And I have to say, as a mum of a 9-year-old myself, it's a really exciting thing that you're talking about when you say the first half of your book is about things like managing screen time and device time. I think, all of us parents are struggling a little bit with that. I think it's a difficult thing. You can see this is something that your child loves and enjoys, but it's difficult when certainly for my 9-year-old, always got his headphones on. So it doesn't matter where I call him from in the house to ask him something, he can't hear me the first time. And I end up sort of stomping in and already feeling cross about screen time, devices, and so on. So what are your tips? How would you say that parents can be supportive around their children's gaming and around, using devices like this without causing all those arguments that we all dread?
Great question. And before I give you a couple of thoughts here, I just want to say that for the book, I actually interviewed parents and child psychologists from around the world to get their tips. I'm not a parent myself, So this is not a lived experience for me. And that's where I wanted to draw on, what other people had done, what had worked for them, and try and find some trends, which is what I then put into the book. Now, I guess there's a couple of interesting things there that you've mentioned. You said headphones on, playing in room at 9 years old. So there's a question there of where should children be playing based on their age? Should they be in a public space within the home so that they're easily accessible, easily visible? So again, that's one thing to think about of, are they shutting themselves away in their bedroom, and therefore I've got less visibility of what they're doing and who they're talking to? It's going to be harder for me to communicate with them. So is there a way to ensure that that gaming experience is in more of a public place?
Yeah.
I think in terms of, the comment that you made about, stomping and trying to have a conversation and feeling slightly cross, I think it's almost about taking a step back, okay? And not wanting to judge, but it's like, as a parent, you obviously see the world through your eyes. You have responsibility for a child, okay? If you take a pause and go, what's the child experiencing? What is it that they are doing? How are they wanting to spend their time? For him, he'll have his headphones. I mean, I've got them on now just because it enables me to cut out the rest of the sounds. But they'll be wanting to focus and spend their time playing. So for them, a lot of it will be, I want my headphones on because I want to block out all of the rest of the noise so I can focus. Okay. So if you start to understand those things, take some time to understand the way that the game works. And so one of the things in the book is the watch, ask, play. It's a 3-step method for understanding the games that children are playing, so that you can get that understanding and say, okay, I now understand why he wants to potentially spend an extra, 5 minutes, 10 minutes at the end of device time because he wants to finish a level, or he's trying to, kill a boss, or he's actually playing with friends and the game hasn't ended yet. Okay, do I need to be a bit more flexible so that I'm not cutting him off or her off, halfway through an activity, because that's the type of thing that can lead to arguments. In the same way that if you as an individual, you have a hobby, you're doing something, or you're really engrossed in reading a book and the doorbell goes, and you're like, oh man, you've just interrupted what I was doing. It's a similar sort of thing. It's just that the medium is different. So if we can spend some time understanding the world from their perspective, how they want to spend their time, how they want to spend their focus, understand a bit more about the games, it puts us in a better position to, work with them to find some common ground. So one of the things in the book that was suggested by, the parents and child psychologists that I interviewed was family contract. Okay. Talking about when can you play? Where can you play? How long for? What are the rules if you overstep that? What are the blackout things, all that sort of stuff, so that there's a general agreement within the family unit of what's going to work, what's not going to work, how do we review this, what are the potential consequences. And a key thing that was actually brought up was that if you're going to put consequences in place, let the child decide. Because the thinking is they're generally harsher on themselves than you as a parent. Okay?
Interesting.
But it also means that if they've helped create that family contract, they've bought into it. So it's now something that absolutely they've helped to put in place. Another thing is the 10-15 rule.
Okay.
So this is about the last 10 to 15 minutes of device time of sitting with the child, helping them understand that you may now want to transition to something else. Understanding where they are in the game. Are they close to finishing a level? Maybe they need an extra 5 minutes just to get there. If they're playing a game and you can see in that last 10 to 15 minutes, they keep dying. Again, maybe it's that opportunity to say, maybe we just take a pause right now, come back to it later, come back to it tomorrow. It gives you that time to work with them to say, okay, are we at a suitable end point? Can you get closure on this, on the time and effort that you've just put in? Do I need to be flexible and give you a bit more time? So that 10-15 rule is one that can support in reducing the arguments and finding that sensible point for moving on to something else. Another suggestion was about having activities to move straight into. A couple of the people that I interviewed was like, I shout and scream and I want my children to put the devices down, and then they sit there and go, okay, now what? You've taken it away, you've told me to put it down, but there's nothing for me to move into. So it's about having not necessarily identical or similar activities, but at least something for them to move into. Yeah, it could be homework, it could be bath time, it could be mealtime, it could be, a walk in the park, whatever it is, rather than just saying, put it down and then just leaving them sitting there, thinking about what to do next. It's easier if you've got something for them to transition straight into. So those are a couple of things that came out from the interviews that I did. And, I've tried to incorporate those into the book.
I think that's brilliant. It's really interesting. And I think another thing that I was thinking about as you were talking there is understanding, as a parent, understanding that there are different kinds of game. And yes, you can pause some of them, and no, you can't pause other ones. Yeah. So if you're playing a sort of multiplayer online game and you're all working really hard to get to a target, no, you can't just stop. I'm thinking of a Plants vs. Zombies game that my 9-year-old plays, and it's a teamwork game and you're all working towards it. And you can see the counting down. So you kind of know as a parent, even if he's got headphones on, you can watch, okay, there's another 5 minutes. Although I have to say on that one, sometimes it seems to restart again. You just get to the end point and it's okay, hold on.
But that's one of the things of, if you gain that understanding of how the game works, you can also start to understand, like, oh, actually, that's sneaky. You've started a new level now. That's not what we discussed. Okay, I understand that there's a level system here and you can progress. So maybe we say do 2 levels and then, it's time for a break. But otherwise, it's like you look and go, they're still going. Oh, they're still going. Oh, they're still going. And in reality, actually, they just progressed, and actually it's a new level or episode or, match or whatever it is that, depending on the game that they're playing. So if you can gain that understanding, again, it empowers you to say, right, I now have the understanding. I can see you when you're trying to cheat the system a little bit. Okay, let's have that conversation.
Yeah, and they will give you a bit of grudging respect for that as well. Knowledge is power, all of that. Okay, that's brilliant. We're coming towards the end of our time on Facebook Live, which is a shame because there's just so many things we could talk about. I'm sure that we will be doing more work together with you, and certainly coming backwards and forwards between our different works, because there's such a big overlap in what we do, and it's a really exciting thing that you've created. I'm not sure, I think the links are in the comments below if you're watching the recording of this. So there'll be a link to Philip's website. We'll be able to find out a bit more about what he does and about where you can buy a copy of his book. There's also a link going in there to our website. If you've been interested or inspired by what you've heard today, please do consider donating to us or booking us to come into your school if you're a teacher, or just sending us a friendly message saying hi, because we love that. It has been lovely to talk to you, Philip. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who has been watching today. Hope it's been useful. Please let us know in the comments, and have a brilliant rest of the day in your annoyingly warm Dubai.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, and thank you for the Break Foundation for this opportunity to share some of my learnings and experiences.